start creating an identity. Bloody hell, who am I? Sometimes I've ended up going, I'm probably more bloody African than Lenny Henry.
Yeah. Welcome to the Global Indian Podcast, the world's greatest journey and the official platform for people of Indian origin. Because let's face it, we are everywhere. Welcome back to The Voyage. This is Season 1, Episode 7, Made in India. My name is Rajan Nazran, and I explore. For over a decade, I've traveled the world, piecing together the kaleidoscope that is our community. I've been held hostage, faced Ebola, and met extraordinary individuals, often in destinations that would surprise you. In this season, I'm joined by my dear friend, screenwriter, actor, and social heart, Kulvindher Ghir, and together we're taking you on a voyage for the ears as we plunge into the human experience of being a person of Indian origin and take a closer look at the countries we now call home. This episode is an ode to the power of identity. Meet the global Indian, who is both an entrepreneur and a custodian of this notion of Indianness. Now, we've all seen the headlines in regards to India and the recent footage of religious riots. In this episode, we discover what it's like to be a Christian in Mumbai and discuss the larger picture of identity. Welcome to a conversation with a true gentleman and his notion on what is taking place and what you should consider. Welcome to a conversation with Jolly Kochery. You can find out more about the Global Indian series at the end of this podcast. I hope you enjoy this session.
And just move. Get up 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 and just.
What's happening with this idea of this nationalist movement at the moment?
Well, I think, honestly, if you ask me, I think it is just blown out of proportion by the social medias and all those vested interests. I would say that present government, which is in power today, is just brought in focus certain issues which were under the carpet for so long. Then the people started taking it in different directions, blowing it out of proportion, and also spreading out so many wrong information. If you ask me, are you proud to be an Indian? I will say, yes, I am proud to be an Indian first.
Well, I was going to say, It's weird for me because perception of India has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. I remember I was sitting down with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia and we're laughing about the Indiana Jones scenes, where everyone thought as Indians we ate monkey brain and eyeballs and so forth. But now what we found is a lot of people are saying, well, hang on, this is a country that has got no religious tolerance. It's somewhere that you have, obviously, the rape scenes have been pushed across the globe. And the perception of India's changed massively. It's all well and good for me to hear what India's economy is growing and booming. But I'm British. I'm a British Indian. I'm proud of my heritage. But ultimately, every country that I go to, people see me as Indian first before the Brit. And that's the interesting thing, I think, for people who live outside of India, that ultimately we are branded.
See, if you really look at India, some of these are happening in some small places and then it gets blown out. And then they start painting India with the same brush that the minorities are not safe and they are persecuted and things. And I being a Catholic, we have, I don't think so, I ever even till today felt that I'm threatened because of my belief. Maybe because I live in Bombay, which is highly cosmopolitan city and thing. But honestly, I travel a bit around Europe and Southeast Asia. And before even going to these places, you were really feeling shy to show your Indian passport. Because that is the way it was looked on. And that's the image we created globally. But if you look at it, what has happened in the past 10 years and odd, I think there's been a sense of pride. If you go to any part of the world, you see so many Indians working out, whether they are in US, Canada, and Europe, because Haiti has enabled that image change to a large extent. Then education has helped a lot of Indians to come up on the ladder for corporate world. If you look at it, Microsoft, their top man is an Indian. If you look at Google, you look at many of these multinationals, a lot of them are Indians. I feel there is a sense of pride now. We don't feel, oh yeah, what people will say about. Today, people are, this is my experience the last couple of years. Travel, they want to know what's happening in India. Yes, it do happen in some small places, because you got to understand a lot of people are uneducated, they are illiterate, they can be easily ignited by some leaders talking something, and then the problems crops up. But painting it across India is that we are less tolerant, and we don't value the minorities, I think that is incorrect.
It's good hearing it from you, because you're there. It's like you say, is what pictures are sent out to the world itself, and what we know. As for kind of people's origins and people who have left India, as for my origins in that respect, what does India feel about those migrants in that who had left and gone and developed their lives?
Yes, I think migration is an age-old. If you look at history, it's all about people migrations. People migrated for different reasons, and what we feel is, I think they are the people who are the exploring capabilities, and they love to go to new places and explore, and that is a great journey. But then if you look at it from India point of view, I think they are the ambassadors for India, who have gone out, settled there, merged with the local community. They have left the mark on that community and created a vibrant society out there. But they still have that touch. Yes, our forefathers were from India, and I think we do look forward to their contributions, because they do a lot of contribution towards India economically.
I only ask that because about identity as well, and issues of identity, and having to create sometimes your own identity when you're so far away from your motherland in one respect, if not in generations. And sometimes what that identity in its history has turned out to be. It's quite interesting when people ask you of here, oh, you're Indian, or of an Indian origin, or you say, well, actually, I'm not so Indian. I think that, Jolly is far more Indian than I am.
I think let us be honest about it. You maybe your forefathers or grandfather may have decided to move from India to UK and settle down. Then you were all born and brought up there, and you are a British citizen by all means. And to connect with the motherland is very, very, very thin, because what your parents have talked to you about India, or grandparents have talked to you about India, and then occasional trip back to meet some relatives. So that I think what they should feel proud is, yes, we left a country which was one of the largest democratic country even today in the world, and we had some of the greatest leaders that emerged during. If you look at the history of the world, it's just for few people, and one was Mahatma Gandhi, and these are all touch points one can always connect with.
That's right. Yes.
I suppose that's the question, isn't it? What makes us Indian? Because it can't be the orthodox method of nationality, because evidently we're all different nationals, across the globe. But Jolly, in your perspective, obviously your brother was in Canada, he set up a life there. What is this Indianness within all of us?
I think it's something that is inborn. It is something which is there in every human being. If you are from a particular country, that you start loving that country for what it stood for, and you start believing in something what the country stand for. And that, for me, is what is Indianness all about. We are a tolerant nations. Had all religion in India, and they still exist. And we have been the one teaching the world about non-violence, and that is even today is the strongest tool to fight against oppressions. And
I was going to say, Kuli, do you feel that Indianness is a loving for the geographical area and to each other, and it should be separated from policy, almost government? Because the reality is, every country, the governments are going to change constantly.
but I think for the people of the country, not with the government comes and goes, but the Indianness remains. It's a kind of how you look at it, how the government behaves. But that is government behavior, their thing is nothing to do with Indianness.
Yeah, I agree, because I think what it is, I can even make it more specific. The humanity that lays within all that, the idea of it. And India has that. India has that for centuries and centuries, and has held on to that. And that's freedom as well. See, freedom of actually tolerance is freedom. So what I'm saying here is that yes, the people is important, but we have to even take it to another demographic. It's the young people that is more important, because that's the future that you lay for of those young people. And I think that's what happened with India, because the demographic was young and it was energized, and they had tolerance in them with their cultures and the ideas they brought in. And I think that went with the nomadic traveler. And then he took that culture within his life, within his families, and they just carried those ideas with him. And hopefully that what makes them feel what makes me proud of being that element of Indian in me. When you look at that massive demographic there, like you did say, it's the largest democracy. And it's really, really enlightening to see today, when they say 1.3 billion people are in isolation, and the country is in isolation. They stick together.
If you look at what is happening today in India, is the young population of India is emerging. They are educated. They have aspirations. The moment you have people opinionating on everything, there is a healthy discussions. But then you should know that you need to somehow come to a middle path and not go to the extremes.
Yeah.
And that's the most dangerous part. So if you follow the middle path, and I think it's going to be a great, people will find prosperity in this nation. People find their aspirations being fulfilled. And I think it's a fantastic journey for everybody, because moment you have the growth and that economic push from bottom of the pyramid to the middle and middle to the up, and that is where you see the game change that's going to happen in Asia.
It will happen in gender as well. That's for we'll get rid of this ideas of men and women, and whereas the equality will rise.
See, if you look at it, yes, that is an issue which I think we as an Indian is grappling with, because of the gender equality. In the metros and the major cities, it is not that much. But when you go to rural India, it's a reality.
Yeah.
And I think more and more people get educated. I think that will break down.
India has never gone out to conquer the world, but the world has always come to conquer India. It's quite interesting kind of view. Have I got that right?
You're right, because if you look at our history, all the invasion in India came from Northwest, right from Alexander the Great.
That's right.
Everybody, they all came from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and to India, and that's how it was all conquered happened.
Yeah, so it's always been, but the history is that over in India itself, what is the indigenous who are the indigenous culture there then?
No, but, I think the ones who are in the south of India, which is the Dravidian
Yeah.
civilization, I think they are real people who
Good.
were still down in India for millions of years. But I think even when you look at the Harappan and the Indus Valley civilization, it's been
That's right.
one of the most advanced civilization.
That's right. Yeah. So that's interesting because India has always consumed, taken in, but it's never ever gone out to actually say, right, we're going to actually go out and like Sikandar, or whether it be, Hitler or whoever it maybe decides to go, I'm going to go and conquer the world. It's never had. I mean, the Mughal Empire came in as well. So it's interesting, the behavior of that land.
Yes.
and
It's very interesting. What we exported from India to other part of the world is religion. We gave Jainism, Buddhism, and that was taken as far as all the places in Southeast Asia. And we never went and conquered any nations.
Those particular ways of life. I don't see them necessarily as religions. I see them a way of life. So India must have been passing. The infancy happens in its nomadicness. It starts to walk. It starts to tell actually what the idea of that humanity is. So it does. So it's bringing stuff in, but yet it's what is given out is a way of life. But it's not particular. I think it becomes quite individual. It's not as. It is tribal then.
Yes, it is.
It does.
And if you look at it, even what we have taken in, we took in Parsis. It was a country that took in, and it is a country that gave in.
See, makes you proud to be Indian.
I am.
So am I. Very much so. So am I, see, Jolly. Because that's what I learned from it. And, as much as... but I do keep that as a part of me, but not as a complete part of me,
The conversation is interesting because it is this whole notion of identity. And what's interesting for us is that all three of us, well, Kuli and I, we have the same nationality. Jolly has a different nationality in terms of passport, but yet three of us share a heritage of Indianness to some degree. What I'm curious to see is what is the common denominator amongst us beyond having ancestry in India? What does it really mean to us?
Yeah, I think it's I would put it this way: it is values.
Yeah.
The values comes from your upbringing, from your parents, from your grandparents, and the other teachers. And the values are passed from generation to generation. And I think that's a key.
Yeah, I think so.
I'll say that isn't that the same with every culture? You go towards Ethiopia or even Nigeria, the values of the elders being passed through. We've seen that in a variety of different areas. Is there anything more than that? Because that's a very human, instinctive thing to do. When you're outside of India, what is almost held up to you as a mirror that makes you feel, oh wow, I really am Indian?
I would say that because one thing is, for me, I look at it in the mirror and then say, okay, here am I, born in these great nations, and I've been nurtured and supported by this country, and I'm loyal to this country, and that's my pride.
See, it's quite strange when you take those values of identity, and obviously you say that born in Kenya, speaking Swahili a little bit, and speaking Punjabi, then moving into England and seeing a complete and having to learn English.
That's a journey by itself.
It's those eyes when you have a look. All right, fair enough. I was young, and the journey is an adventure, and it's a real kind of, you grab onto that adventure. So those values that your parents have given you is quite interesting, because I look at my dad, and I think my dad's a legend, because I think he's amazing. Because here was an individual who lost his father at the age of 21 in Africa and left him 9 siblings, 2 sisters and 8 brothers, and he's the eldest, sitting in Africa, complete poverty, and decides all of us, and then you get independence happening in Kenya. And what does he decide to do? Because obviously his father came over from India and settled in Africa, and then I'm about in the independence happens in 63. I'm born in 65. So, and the next minute is that Dad had decided to move to Sheffield, to come to England, and particularly to Sheffield because he was an engineer. He wanted to go into becoming engineering. But then, who would have thought I didn't think that that one would end up being an actor or a writer in that respect. But there was, and then what happens is when you make those choices, you make the reason why you make that choice is because you don't want an identity either, because you don't want to be labeled as a particular person. And you say, well, here's a profession that allows me to be anything I want. So your approach at that age of a 9-year-old is one thing is you're imitating people and living in the society that you are, and then you are actually responsible for that society as you're growing up, because you breathe the air of that and you care for that society. So it's to eradicate it to a certain extent an identity that's been given to me, because I feel I can be Brad Pitt, I can be James Dean, and I can be Dilip Kumar, and I can be Mel Mittal. I don't have to be a comedian, or I don't have to be a serious actor. I can be all of them. Why not?
Yeah,
absolutely.
So those choices are So when that's how I've come into this. But I can only value those. I can great value of culture, because they make me not only the Indian culture of it, but the cultures that are surrounded by me as well. And that helps. And I think that's how we have to see ourselves as British now, I feel.
Well, we are British. That's the thing. We're born here. But here's the thing, Jolly, because
we're not born here. I'm not born here.
You're not born. Yeah, sorry, you're not born. You're born. But it's where you rest your head. It's where you feel your strength of character, almost having a common denominator with other people around you.
But is that any different from being Indian?
Well, is coming down to identity, isn't it?
And I always tell people, if you decide to migrate and move on, you need to get yourself assimilated into that community, and then you will find the true happiness. But if you try to keep your identity and keep it separate, and then you find all kind of challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. See, what interests me about this is that the reason why we're looking at Indianness is, one, it's part and parcel of part of our identity as an onion skin, but it's also the greatest journey on earth. There's no other diaspora at this size that has been well placed entirely over the planet, from Ecuador, Argentina, through to Germany, Netherlands, through to Fiji. So really the story of India, or the Indianness, is actually the greatest story of migration on this planet, of a particular grouping of people from one country. So it really gives you an understanding of human behavior more than anything else. That's kind of how I look at what Indianness is. And you're right, it's our ability to go into countries 2 generations deep or 3 generations deep, but really have a sense of belonging there. We're the original nomads, aren't we? Like
you should understand one reason for that, because the north faced the entire invasions, so people became very aggressive, and it became a potpourri of different culture which came out from the Persia, which came from the Mughals, which came from the thing. So that people developed those kind of characters. Their characteristic became aggressive, became defensive. And if you look at the physical features, they are tall, they are well built. Where when you come down to south, it is different.
Yeah. No, I totally see it because my dad said I was always related to Secundara anyway, Alexandra.
Yeah.
And when they settled in the north, because the warriors stayed as farmers, and that's all different. Like Jolly was saying, you get many different cultures that came from the north. So we are made up of already. We are made up of difference. You know, we have kind of adapted and changed. Our history it lends itself the human journey where it takes you.
Well, that's it.
Yes.
It's weird. I was in Macedonia a while back, and I met with the Romani community there. And these guys say that they're from Alexander the Great. They're from India, and if you actually hear the language, there's certain words that you can almost recognize in there.
Yeah.
And so when I asked them, so what are you? And one of the guys, interesting, said, "We're Indian." I thought, how bizarre, because if I were to take you to India, is it the case that other people have to recognize you to be part of that culture in order for you to be accepted? Or do we use it as a loose term to say, actually, that's where our origins are from? And that is essentially it. You know, Jolly, for example, we had on one of the podcasts, we had the former president of Guyana. These guys came in I think it's 3-4 generations deep. They've been in that country for years. They came over as indentured workers, not out of choice, not out of your typical migration, but out of forced labor from the British. And when you're in the country, if you ask people, well, what are you? They'll say, well, we're Indian. We're Indo-Guyanese. It doesn't mean that they see themselves as Indian nationals, but this flag that they hold is saying we're there. But this is regardless of a dislocation of language, is regardless of a small dislocation of culture, but it's loosely defining them. I suppose what I want to do, with your help, no pressure, as you showed us, is kind of understand, well, what is this thing? Because you're an international business person, and you have so many employees across India from different backgrounds that almost you have that microscopic gauge to say, actually, even regionally, the thing that really defines us as Indians is but. It's not language. It can't be that. It can't be cuisine, because we all eat, like, cuisine differs from north to south. But there must be that one element, something else, that it can't be just from the land that we're born or our ancestors are from.
Yeah, I think it's, honestly speaking, it's so difficult to put your finger on one and say, hey, this is what makes it. So I'm just struggling to find what should I say to you.
Do you know what Indians normally say to that?
Yeah.
Jo hona hona. What is written is written. What is destiny is destiny.
You know what? That's such an easy social lubricant to use, though,
but that is so important as well, because that allows you spirituality.
Here's a question. Are we fatalistic then? Is that one of the things that we've kind of shared in common? That we have this strong belief in fate? Or is that a religious?
I would say that, yes, there is a strong undercurrent of the religious beliefs. And that's is the strong fabric that holds it. And then, yes, honestly, I have no other answers for it.
No, that is a tough one, because I think that's the ingrainedness of culture, and sometimes it's you know, there's certain things can be said and not be spoken, and yet certain things can be read and not written. You know, that's the ambiguity in this culture as well, because there is, and when you have that, then there is the answer of go and find out as well. Go and learn. And I think India has that. Whether it holds on to that, I don't know. I hope it holds on to that.
Yes.
But is that just a natural evolution, though, do you think? Because as you said, Jolly, India is growing, the economy is changing, you've got more wealth than ever before, you have a huge disparity at the moment, but that gap hopefully is going to start to close between the very rich and the poor. But with that progress comes the ability to debate, to discuss. Do you think there'll be a point in time where people would lose their introspectiveness in India?
The way I look at it is that economic growth, that is definitely going to push people out of poverty, and people moving up the ladder. That will be uh, that is going to happen. That's 100%, because aspiration of the people to get educated, to get well-paid job, to move up, and to but then they want to provide better facilities to their children, and that's something which is I think which is happening all over the world. And
Yeah.
people aspiration is growing. They want everything better than what they had. Coming back to people losing their, you said, what did you mention?
Well, I'm saying with economic growth comes the ability to have choices. With choices comes the ability to discuss and debate. So therefore, the things that we hold on to Indianness, our faith, our beliefs, they tend to start getting more questioned when people go up that pyramid, so to speak. So do you think it'll come a time when Indianness in India really doesn't matter anymore? That the
I
sense
think
of identity and national pride?
I think point of time that will happen, because if you look around the world,
Yeah,
every other country that has really happened.
yeah.
When you
Mm.
grow up, then you start questioning everything. Then you start questioning your beliefs and things. So I think it's a very, very, that is how things evolve. That's how things changes.
But Rajan, do you think that's a new world order that should be for all over the world anyway?
Absolutely. If you're asking me directly, do I believe that
Yeah.
we need to shed our skins of identity to reconnect to who we are? Absolutely, because the bottom line is that my skin, my pigment doesn't really indicate much, because the more you travel, the more you see other people that look exactly like us. So I think, yeah, we should almost become a monoculture, because then we have less disruption, but then the emphasis is on the human. My perception of India coming into it is that, yes, it is the home of our ancestors, and our holidays, quote unquote, to India can happen to be like a lot of people sitting at home in a village somewhere, talk to some guy who's my cha-cha, or whatever it is, but he turned out to be my next door neighbor's postman, right? So we're not even related.
Mm.
But those were those fond memories, yes, for what it was, but did it create allegiance to India? Not necessarily. Is when we started to travel, go to all these countries, and we do the interviews, and people look at me. I remember I did a press conference in Sierra Leone, and the guy said, "Man, you look Indian, but you sound like a white man." I thought, how interesting. And then it doesn't help, because I have, obviously we did the big features with the Indian Express through Emmanuel.
Yeah.
So now
Yeah.
people are saying, well, you have to be Indian because you're doing the big features with the national papers of India. And so I'm finding myself having to explain, actually, I am Indian origin, but I'm not an Indian national. There's two different things there. And then my debates come with people from India. That they say to me, I remember one of the ambassadors, she said, Rajan, the guys that left India have become more Indian than the guys in India. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, what do you mean by that? She goes, they were stuck in a time warp of the 1960s when they left.
Yeah. No, it's so true, because the Punjabi that stayed in me is the Punjabi that was Guri Punjabi that was spoken in the north of India 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So when I went off to India and I spoke in Punjabi with them, and they go, tu kitthon aaya? And this particular tone, and they came in. मैं कहा मैं तो पैदा होया सगों उधर अपना नैरोबी वाल केनिया मैं असली मैं
Dead
उधर
Punjabi, isn't it?
and they're going bloody hell, and they said and see, language carries and the culture carries with you in that respect. And but yeah, because I got myself into quite in a strange space, and I don't know whether that isn't a unique thing or not, and where I have to sometimes end up, certain words will come out in Swahili,
Yeah.
which at one point I thought they were really Punjabi.
Yeah. we had the same thing growing up, Kuli. I said to my wife, I used a couple of words, and I thought that they were Punjabi or Hindi. It turned out it was Tagalog. And he thought,
yeah. And then the mass arguments would start. Like Kisu is Swahili, you know, and in Punjabi is kachu, you know, like knife.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
we had so many arguments with it, you know, and until I had to kind of find out, actually, this is Swahili and this is Punjabi,
Yeah.
and slowly amalgamating and putting like nyanya, tomatoes, you know, ganda,
Yeah.
sabji,
Yeah.
boga. So there's loads of words that was coming in, and loads of stuff. Then you start see automatically. Then one has to start creating an identity. Bloody hell, who am I? You know, sometimes I end up going, I'm probably more bloody African than Lenny Henry.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's so true though, isn't it?
But sadly, I don't know if there's a place for people like me anyway. I don't think there is, because I actually don't want to create a place for myself.
Oh, Kuli, if it wasn't for Corona, I'll give you a hug right now. But there is social distancing, you know.
You know, one thing which really made a impact on me during this discussion was, Rajan, you just said people who went out of India and migrated and stayed, they took those values and things what was in those period of time.
Yeah.
And the people who stayed back in India, they have slowly changed
Yeah.
because the economic developments and everything changed that thing. So you see those people who have gone so many years back from India and settled down in other places.
Yeah.
They had that at that point of time, what they thought was their real Indian values they carried with them, and that remained there because that was kept there, and then they merged with that local community, and they imbibed what is there good in that, and that they progressed there. So this remained almost on a subconscious mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
And if we go by the old adage that old is gold, and the true value of India was at that moment in time, that speck where people were trying to identify who they were, that they were coming together of people, but then it was more so not ambition, but I think it was desperation. A lot of people end up traveling out there to make a better life. Those values that they held on to then was, would you say that that was a true Indian, that true Indian vibe before things started to change?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No, I don't agree to that because if you look at it from British period, then it was the workers, laborers who went out.
Yeah.
And the railway construction, they went for sugarcane farming, all these kind of activities. So,
yeah, because you can see it, the migration, because all that. But what was really, really apparent was in every aspect, whether it in caste, creed, color, or anything it comes into, it's to better your life. So one migrates is to better oneself, to say I can maybe put, or even send money or whatever, send money back, or I can better my family or whatever. So it comes from a social idea first.
Yes.
So that's a type of migration that happened about 40, 50 years ago anyway, when you know, from Uganda, or whether from East Africa, from the Indies, from Africa. So that migration started. So when people wanted to better themselves. They didn't, and what the opportunity, they saw the opportunity. That's the best thing, is you look at it and you see the opportunity, and the opportunity was in education.
Yeah.
And the education was free. Healthcare was free. So it gives you a good foundation and an equal field to start playing. You know, and here was a culture, here was a democracy that you ended up coming into Britain, where the times were changing and the big questions were being asked about equality.
Is being Indian an idea that goes deeper, where it's the need to better oneself? We've seen it through religion. We've seen it through even our culinary arts of India, and then internationally, the people that did go out there as part of the indentured chef from Caribbean to Fiji. The whole idea behind that was to better oneself, to explore oneself, that deeper yearning almost wanderlust for your own soul. Do you think that's what it is, Jolly? Do you think that's a thing that we all have in common as being Indians as such?
I agree 100%. That's it. It's
Mm.
that the spirit within, which want to explore, which want to better
Yeah.
oneself.
Yeah.
I think that's the journey.
I suppose that's what it is. It's the idea of bettering oneself, because we've seen it all over the globe. Every country where you got the people, and the ability is an idea of giving back to one another. During the Sierra Leone crisis with Ebola, it was the Indian community or people of Indian origin there. They're going above and beyond to help support the local communities there. Good. And Kuli, what's your final Kenyan, Indian, British,
Yorkshire, Leeds, London.
London.
I'm looking for a little island where I can go and stay. And can be left alone, you know. No, I can start my own little cult thing. No, no. Look, it boils down to time is short as well. See, of individuals, it's not long. But in that time, you know, through perseverance of love, you can make a lot of change.
Yeah.
You know, and the great thing is, it all starts, as Shakespeare says, or many other teachers and many other philosophers may say, look within, and that's where you start.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's that generosity. Now, as human beings, I think we can offer each other, especially at this moment, is so needed. That, you know, every individual's life is as important as your neighbor's.
Absolutely.
And if we can start thinking out of the box that way a little bit, and thinking this is not only belongs to me but belongs to us, I think that's our human journey as a spirit, that togetherness, and we can generate a lot of energy that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you know what? To round it up, I suppose a thought came into my head in and around this. Although your speech, rousing speech, almost cult-like, kind of triggered it up. Is our obsession with Indianness cult-like behavior? But we're not going to go into it. But I think that there's something there. There's a podcast right there that need to belong. And I think the other element to this is, you're absolutely right. Both wise gentlemen that we have here, is our Indianness is not our obligation towards the government in charge. It goes way beyond that. It's not our obligation towards saying, well, this is what India was like in the 1960s. It's actually looking within and saying, well, how do we define it to be, and how can we bring it forth in the environments that we now live, whether you are in Mumbai, or we are in London, or we are in Kampala. And those type of ideas there is really what defines us. What a fantastic episode. I'm sure you agree. And, you know, a special thanks to Jolly for being so open and candid about his experiences of being a Christian in Mumbai and how he's looking at the outside community as well. As always, if you like these episodes and you want to see more coming up, make sure you like, you subscribe, and leave a comment. It massively helps. If you'd like to find out more about the series, you can check us out on social media, either on Instagram at the Nazrans, or via Twitter at Global Indian Pod. Until next time and next week, I hope all remains well, and especially given these dark times of COVID, remain safe. Take care for now.